Hormones. Can what you eat really make a difference? We're about to find out as I interview Dr. Neil Barnard on The Exam Room. Today's topic is the single most requested that we have ever had from listeners. Got dozens and dozens of messages and emails asking, can we please talk about the change of life? And so here now to help us break it all down is Dr. Neil Barnard. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Great to be with you, Chuck.
I am so glad that you are here. Are you surprised at all that so many people are writing in, so many women asking for help with this?
Well, I have to say I'm not surprised because it's an issue that affects all women. It's always going to happen sooner or later. And for some women sail through it, but other women have problems with menopause where it causes all kinds of symptoms, and they're looking for answers, and rightly so.
And we'll end the show with a couple of listener questions they've written in, and I've picked a couple that I think a lot of women can relate to. But before we get to those, let's just kind of take a little dive in here. I mean, my first question is, what role does food play when it comes to menopause?
Well, first of all, I should maybe say what menopause is not also, because some people imagine that menopause is just this artificial thing that occurs because women are living longer. You'll once in a while hear this argument. Back 100 years ago, the average lifespan might have been 50. And so now that women are living into their 80s, well, she's just living past her sell-by date, and you ought to expect problems. Let me tell you something. There is nothing to that whatsoever. It is true that average life expectancy was shorter in years past, but that really wasn't because everyone was dropping dead at 50. What it was because there was a lot of infant mortality, and that factors into the average. So if you have half the population living to a ripe old age of 80, and the other half dying in infancy of infections and things like that, then the average would be 40. But people have always lived long lives, and the idea that somehow you're past your sell-by date, that is just complete nonsense. What menopause really means is that the ovary has run out of viable oocytes. These are eggs. It's not releasing them anymore. That causes hormonal changes, and so the periods stop. And yeah, foods do seem to play a role, and we have seen this both when we look at international comparisons where people are on different kinds of diets. They get a different experience of menopause. And as their diets change, say westernization in Asian countries, then the experience of menopause changes too. So we have a lot of evidence that diet plays a role, sometimes a harmful role, but it can be helpful too.
The Eastern diet, we've talked a lot about that on the show when it comes to blue zones in particular. Look at the Okinawan diet. Not a whole lot of animal products in there, very light on that. Right. And animal products, by and large, have a lot of hormones in them. So I'm curious, what role do those hormones found in animal products play in this whole process?
You're right. And it's not just Okinawa. Okinawa is at the very bottom of Japan, but Japan overall, it didn't follow exactly the Okinawan diet, which was very heavy in sweet potatoes, for example. That was the Okinawan favorite staple.
Right.
For the rest of Japan, it was rice, soy products, some use of fish, but it wasn't a humongous chunk of fish in the middle of the plate. It was rice in the middle of the plate. Really effectively, no cheese, very little dairy meat, all these kind of things. And that's important for the reason that you mentioned. Dairy products have hormones in them because the cow is pregnant, and many people have hypothesized that if you're pumping up the amount of hormones in your body prior to menopause, and then when menopause arrives, the amount of hormones in your body comes crashing down because your body's not making them anymore, you effectively have sort of hormone withdrawal that is much more accentuated than if you weren't eating those hormones along with it. Now, it's not just the hormones in the food, but certain foods help your body to eliminate hormones. So a woman's hormone levels, if she is on a meat-based diet without fiber, with a lot of dairy products, could be 25-30% higher than when she's on a healthier diet.
Is that why some women experience when the hot flashes? A lot is made of those. So is that why some women have a more or are more affected by hot flashes than others? You just talked about that 25-30% difference, and then the hormone withdrawal essentially. I would assume then that affects the hot flashes.
That's the hypothesis exactly. And I didn't mean to say that it's all the hormones in the food, but it's the diet that causes the hormone levels to be higher. So it's a little bit of it is the hormones in the cheese, but a lot of it is just the way foods cause the body to handle hormones differently.
Can the change of life occur earlier or later depending on a person's diet? Has there been any research into that?
Evidence suggests that the reproductive window, if I can put it that way, between the time at menarche when the periods start and menopause when they end, that window can change. And it's been changing really for more than 150 years. In the teen years, if you look back around the mid-1800s, the average age of the first period that girls would have, it could have been as high as 17, 18 years of age. Today, that's unheard of. That girl would be brought to her doctor's office like, what's wrong with you? Now you'll have girls having their periods at 10, 11, earlier than that sometimes. And if you think about it, you're not ready to be a mother at that age. You're not psychologically mature enough. Why should you be physically able to raise it, to have a baby at that point? And some of us have been concerned that it's hormonal changes that are coming from the foods that we're eating. On the other end of life, there does seem to be some stretching of that menopausal window as well. That said, menopause is going to happen. It's part of life. It's a normal part of life, and it's not a disease. It's not a diagnosis. It's not a bad thing. In my view, it's in part nature's way of protecting you. Might sound funny, but what I mean is that during a woman's reproductive life, every month she has a surge of estrogenic hormones that are bathing the cells of the breast and the uterus and all the rest of her body in hormones that also, in addition to the good things that these hormones do, they also cause cancer. If a woman has too much estrogen in her blood and too many of these estrogenic surges, her risk of breast cancer is higher. Same with uterine cancer. So let's assume for the moment, if we can put it this way, that nature has some wisdom about it, and so a woman can be fertile for a limited window, but not beyond that. And when you're 51, 52, 55, this is not a time to have a toddler on the floor of your kitchen. This is a time to get on with the rest of your life.
For sure.
You have a lot of stuff to do at that point, and and you need some time to do that. So the reproductive window is relatively short.
You mentioned these hormonal surges and estrogen in particular, and you earlier mentioned also fiber being able to regulate estrogen. How does that work together? What's the correlation there?
It's an interesting thing. The liver filters estrogens out of the blood. Actually, the liver filters a lot of things out of the blood. Estrogens, testosterone, medications you might take. The liver is like a filter, and it says, what's this doing in the bloodstream? It takes the estrogen out. It sends it through a little tube that's called the bile duct that goes to the intestinal tract. And there that estrogen goes down the bile duct into the intestinal tract, and it hooks onto fiber, which is the roughage in plants.
Right.
And that carries it out with the waste. But if your lunch was chicken breast or salmon or cheese, these don't have any fiber in them at all. So the estrogen still is pulled out by the liver and sent down the bile duct, but when it gets into the intestinal tract, there's no fiber for it to hook onto. What happens? It's reabsorbed back into the circulation, into the bloodstream. And it goes around again, and the liver finds that very same estrogen molecule and says, what are you doing here? I thought I got rid of you. And it said, well, I wanted to leave, but there's no fiber for me to hook onto. So the liver takes it again and sends it down the bile duct back into the intestinal tract. There's still no fiber there. So it circulates back into the bloodstream. This is called enterohepatic circulation. Entero means intestinal tract. Hepatic means the liver, like hepatitis.
Sure.
So enterohepatic circulation means the circulation of hormones and other substances from the intestinal tract up to the liver, back down to the intestinal tract, up to the liver, happens time over and over and over again all day. And the net effect is the woman has more estrogenic stimulation than she should have. And that spells a higher risk of cancer and all kinds of other problems.
Wow. Okay.
So the answer is if let's say you're on a plant-based diet, which is what I recommend for anybody.
Right.
Every mouthful has some fiber in it, a little or a lot. That fiber is what your body needs to get rid of the things that the liver is trying to eliminate. Otherwise, you're recycling your garbage.
If you like that video, if you like what you just heard, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and leave a nice comment below. And then to hear the full interview with Dr. Barnard, go ahead and subscribe to the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on Stitcher, wherever it is that you get your podcast from. That's where you can find us. New episodes every Wednesday.